Carl, can you hear me?
Everybody can hear you.
All right. I wanted to say, bom dia. Good morning. Carl, do you want to begin us? Or?
Yeah, just 1 second. I'm gonna set the volume on the TV here, so everybody can hear you. And I'll set.
Just to help me, would if you speak English, would you raise your hand? English? Oh, great, great. Excellent. You heard the, oh no, I know one other Portuguese word, obrigado, that's it.
Just 1 second. Agora, isso. Deixa essa tela dela. Pronto, tá ali. Aumenta lá a tela dela. Já tá gravando? Okay, we can start. You can share your screen. We were seeing your screen now.
Oops. I'm trying to make it full screen, but I'm just having a little difficulty.
No. Just share your screen, and we are gonna. You're gonna see us on a small. It's okay. We're seeing your screen now.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Carl, for inviting me to your seminar. Carl may have told you that we have worked together for many years. What do you think, Carl? I think maybe 10 years?
We're since Global Solution Networks.
Yeah, so a long time. And I was the managing director of the Blockchain Research Institute, which you see as the logo on the slide. And Carl and I have collaborated ever since he published the Blockchain Revolution in Brazil. And we have produced a lot of research. I'm going to talk about some of the research. And our hope is that this conversation will get you thinking about ways that you might help to use blockchain for social good. So once again, we conducted the definitive investigation into blockchain. We produced well over 80 original research projects, many of which Carl is in the process of translating into Portuguese for Brazil. We have been sponsored by some of the largest companies in the world, many of whom are now leading in the blockchain space, including Accenture and IBM and SAP, and other companies such as Delta, FedEx, and Fujitsu. And most exciting for today, we have a long-standing partnership with BRI Brazil. And BRI Brazil is our partner in the research, as well as being the education arm for taking this research out to yourselves and to the rest of the market in Brazil.
Can you put it on the presentation mode, or it's not?
I was trying to do that. How do I do that?
Slideshow, yeah, no, yeah, that's it. Just
technology. Okay. So now, okay, great. Better?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the agenda for this morning. I'm going to be talking a little bit about blockchain as a solution, which you've already covered in your class. So this is going to be a repetition, I'm sure. And then I want to talk about 3 high potential areas for applying blockchain for social good. And those are food security or provenance, land registration, which is a very important issue globally, and high value assets. And although this may not sound like it's for social good, it actually is a way to protect the workers and the supply chain participants who produce the high value assets, as well as the insurance companies that insure them. And then we'll talk about the remaining challenges, because blockchain is still a massive experiment, as you know. But these 3 areas are ones in which I believe we've made a tremendous amount of progress in a very short time. So a brief review of this new digital age that we're part of, and I know you've talked about a lot of these, but we believe that blockchain is the underlying technology that will enable a lot of these other advanced technologies. And remember, all of these technologies depend on data. Even though we've moved from capturing information to capturing value, to do that, we must be storing data. And massive amounts of data take massive amounts of computing power, and they're all connected. In our research, we identified a dozen different industries that were going to be transformed, we believe, by blockchain. These are not companies or industries that have already been transformed, because we are still very early in the process. But each of these industries is seeing the potential for impact and is beginning to lead in the blockchain space. Importantly, retail and financial services, government, healthcare, education, and manufacturing are all very human related and also connect directly to the need for social good to be embedded in the blockchain solution. So I told Carl that I would take a minute to compare the industry momentum that we have with blockchain to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And I know you're all aware of these. But again, we're looking at how can blockchain have a positive impact, and what are the highest potential areas of impact for social good. And I know this is hard to read from your seat, but I can read off to you what's here. And for our purposes, the highest potential is number 1, which is impacting poverty by providing financial inclusion and ease of remittance, and the ways in which people can use cryptocurrencies to do business and participate in the economy. Health and well-being, which are areas that many people are talking about, health being one of the most popular potential applications of blockchain, with the idea that everyone would be registered on a blockchain with protected data and a lifetime account. This, of course, will take probably another 10 years. So it's a great idea. It will take time. And the other one is clean water and sanitation. And here, what we're seeing is a lot of use of cryptocurrency to fund projects and to fund green activity around the world. Affordable clean energy is using blockchain technology to do carbon trading and to do other kinds of advanced climate management strategies. Of course, again, the odds are challenging. Industry innovation and infrastructure, along with production, responsible consumption and production, and management of assets above and below the water. And all these things together constitute the elements of production. And by bringing blockchain to bear on production activity and the well-being of not only the human participants, but also the responsible management of animal and other resources, blockchain plays an important role, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So again, just to give you perspective, we're not proposing what the goodness of blockchain is. We're looking at the sustainable development goals that already exist for us and how blockchain can contribute. Does anyone have a question at this moment? Paul, go ahead.
Então, a Joan, ela apresentou. I will translate for some people that couldn't understand you very well. So, just a second.
Yeah.
So, Joan, ela apresentou um pouco do BRI, falou que junto com o Cal, tem trabalhado por vários anos já, desde o Global Solution Networks, com colaboração, blockchain, o BRI no Brasil, né, com pesquisas com formas de usar o blockchain e investimentos também, conseguir investimentos. Ela era o Management Director, tem as 80 pesquisas originais, né, os parceiros que ela apresentou ali e também os patrocinadores, né? Então, eles têm trabalhado com isso, pensando no blockchain como uma solução. Apresentou os 17 objetivos globais de desenvolvimento, né, segurança alimentar e os potenciais, né, dentro da segunda era da tecnologia. Com os dados, com os valores, como está tudo conectado, das indústrias e as transformações verticais que ela apresentou ali, que estão todas relacionadas à humanidade, né? Então, o potencial para trabalhar com a pobreza, com a economia participativa, saúde e bem-estar, que era o que a gente estava com o Lucas, tudo registrado no blockchain, com potencial para conseguir fundos para projetos, gerenciamento, administração do clima, elementos de produção e a responsabilidade, manejo sustentável, posso falar assim. E aí, se alguém tiver alguma pergunta e não souber falar inglês, falar, eu posso traduzir para vocês. O outro Rodrigo também, se alguém... Okay, you can continue.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. It really is a big
Thank
help.
you.
So, and I will try to go slowly too. The next slide should be very familiar to you because it outlines the strengths of blockchain, but it also describes how blockchain is well suited to serving social goals. And of course, transparency is number one. People need to know what's happening with their government, with their data, and the blockchain allows that in the non-permission blockchain. The fact that the data is immutable, meaning it cannot be changed, is the source of trust. And trust really is the source of good social service. Decentralized control, which you are well aware of, is also important because no single government or industry controls the blockchain, and therefore people can be served without having to serve another master. Reduced cost, of course, is self-explanatory, but the use of tokens and cryptocurrency to fund social activity is also growing. And this is another aspect of serving social goals. I won't be talking about tokens or cryptocurrency today. I'm actually talking about simply the application of blockchain as a solution. Fewer middlemen, also self-explanatory, better ways for people to receive the benefits that they need as quickly as possible. And then, of course, not to forget that it's cryptographic algorithms that protect the asset. So this is not an easy implementation. All of these applications require very advanced computer capabilities, and they take time to implement. We'll talk about that more in a minute. Now, again, to give you a contrast, it's easy to say, hey, healthcare, what a great solution, reduced costs, secure information, a single source of data protection and interoperability. Well, those things are not as easy as they sound, and so it's also important for you to keep in mind that there are continuing limitations. The cost effectiveness, the cost impact of blockchain has yet to be conclusively proven. And one of the factors there, of course, is the cost of energy. There is not yet a secure mechanism for protecting patient data, and we do hear frequently of hacking, so we have to be vigilant. Of course, with all industries, regulatory issues are a huge challenge, and of course, the technical challenges as well. Many healthcare institutions do not have up-to-date infrastructure. Access to the data set and risk of compromise continue. And of course, speed and scalability, which applies to all blockchain applications. But my only point here is to show you that the possibility, the opportunity is there, but we have to continue the work to make it a reality. So now I'll talk about these three areas where we have made progress, and I think this is what's exciting. With food security and diamonds and land registration, we are seeing successful pilots and applications. So that's where I'll go. I'm starting with food security. And so my translator, could you just get me to this place? Who's my translator? What's your name? I'm sorry.
Now you can go. Now you can go. We are making simultaneous translation here.
Oh, okay, great. Super. Okay, so food security. Let's talk about this. I'm going to give you a random set of topics to get you thinking about what this opportunity looks like. And we all have heard the expression fair trade. Some of you may even be in the industry. And in the UN sustainability goals, what that refers to is fair trade for feed, for food, and for animals that become food. And there's been a lot of progress made in the management of animals, especially pork and seafood, that are being moved from their habitat to the people's tables. And that requires a tremendous amount of collaboration all the way down the supply chain. I know you've spoken about supply chain. This is the key to making these social applications successful. We have to get the entire supply chain involved. 20% of the top global grocers have pledged to use blockchain in a very short time frame. And the reason is that this is very attractive to them, not only for protecting their own inventory, but for protecting their customers as well. Huge uptake in this industry, and one for you to watch and possibly contribute to. The public demand for transparency is growing, as you know, and people are concerned about things like the salmonella outbreak recently with Mexican papayas. And the point here is it took 100 interviews to find the source of that salmonella outbreak. And with blockchain, you will know instantly where the animal or where the food came from. Blockchains can also track provenance of more fun products like whiskey and wine and Starbucks coffee. But in all cases, it's a matter of the transparency and the protection. And also remember that the implementation challenges that require sometimes years to implement these solutions are not all blockchain related. They're related to things like building the networks, collaboration in the supply chain, finding the data. And I have a quote to tell you more about that. So these are some ideas to get you thinking about the challenges and the opportunity of food security and food provenance managed by blockchain. And here's just a snapshot of what is happening out there. What are companies already doing to move this social impact forward? The IBM Food Trust, which you may have read about, is on Hyperledger Fabric, and it includes Carrefour, Nestle, Kroger, Albertsons recently joined. And what they're doing is they're using this Food Trust blockchain to manage individual products, not their whole company, not their whole supply chain, but they're piloting individual products. Things like lettuce or papayas or milk, one product at a time, because you have to engage the entire supply chain. This is not a technology you can implement in your store by yourself. You have to have the entire supply chain engaged. IBM claims that millions of individual products were tracked by retailers and suppliers using the Food Trust blockchain during a recent testing period. But I want to underscore the word testing. This is not a solution that's installed. This is a new idea that's being piloted, but the participation rate is very high. I like seeing this update from Bumblebee Tuna. Is Bumblebee a brand in Brazil, Carl? Do you have?
No.
Well, canned tuna. Bumblebee Tuna is a very big brand in the United States, and they're working with SAP on a pilot to track Indonesian tuna. Now again, they're not saying they're going to track all their tuna. They catch tuna all over the world. So you begin to visualize how important the supply chain engagement is. It has to be geographic, it has to be specific, it has to be regulated, and it takes time to do this. But this one is SAP. It's not just IBM's not the only one that's out there. There are others. Walmart separately has spearheaded a project in China, and it's been going on for 2 years. They were tracking mango production. We wrote a research project describing this. Carl, I don't know if you translated that one, but that's a very good one to look at. And again, Walmart is intending to require all their suppliers to use blockchain. And again, in a short period of time. So we'll see if this is possible, but it's a good goal. And in Switzerland, a company named Bühler, who I happen to live very close to their big factories there, the Swiss make equipment and technical solutions for food. And what they've done is develop an antimicrobial electronic tool which actually can impact the food and prevent salmonella. And they have announced that this product will be blockchain ready. So it shows you the international adoption in this area of food security. A few comments from some experts just to give you something to think about, and you can translate this on your own. But traceability, consumers are driving traceability and they want transparency, and it's blockchain's immutability that helps them prove the information is different than what can be corrupted by vendors. So this immutability, this inability to change the information is what provides the safety. The second quote is important because he says that a key benefit is that in order to implement a blockchain, the data needs to be cleansed, structured, and verified. And in the case of this project, he says 75% of the effort is in fixing the data. So it is not just a matter of wanting to do good. You have to have data management capability and, again, a lot of collaboration or cooperation. Walmart China is sounding very bold. They are saying that they expect that traceable meat will account for 50% of the total sales of meat, traceable vegetables 40%, and traceable seafood 12% by the end of 2020. And you know, people use 2020 as a time frame. As far as I know, 2020 is like tomorrow. So we'll see if they can make it. All right, let me stop there. Any questions on food security or any comment? Challenging.
No comments. No, not yet. People still astonishing.
But do you agree that this is a good goal?
Oh, yes, yes.
And can you see the opportunity?
Sure.
All right, well, I'll move on to something that's maybe a little sexier. This is diamonds. And Carl and I wanted to also talk about gold. I don't have the research on our gold work, and the gold work is a little bit different. High value assets like diamonds are managed by the blockchain differently than gold, because gold can actually be converted to a fiat currency. And so it's closer to your cryptocurrency discussions, but I'll stick with the high value assets for the moment. And here I want to make the point that you already know: blood diamonds and also other mining of precious and semi-precious metals and stones are important to the economy all over the world. And I happen to have a bracelet that I bought in Brazil, which is loaded with a range of colors of semi-precious stones. And I know that mining of stones is a very important economy in Brazil. And however, in Africa, it results in human rights violations and violence, which can be prevented by sourcing diamonds from safe locations and being able to track their source. A company in London called Everledger uses blockchain to track individual diamonds from the mine to the jeweler. And the woman who founded this company, very bright woman, began looking at fine wine, and then she realized that she could use the same technology to protect the diamond workers. And this has grown into a very, very popular solution. It's replacing the old manual solution of tracking diamonds, which has been in place for a century. And because it's blockchain and all the features that you know, it can eliminate insurance fraud and reduce the potential for blood diamonds and corrupted product, as well as money laundering, to enter the supply chain. I want to mention that in order to put a diamond, individual diamond, on the blockchain, you literally have to be able to give it a fingerprint and take a picture of it. And diamonds are unique cell structures or crystal structures. I happen to know from hearing her speak that not all precious stones have the right attributes to be recorded on the blockchain. In other words, some of them are too changeable. They're not hard enough, and they wouldn't necessarily be authentic. So diamonds are an important example because they are a fixed asset. But authenticity and custody of high value items could include automobiles, does include rare wines, and can also include priceless artwork. And you know that blockchain is being used to manage music. So art and assets, all of these things are positive. But my purpose here is not to make all the wealthy people safe and sound and save money for the insurance companies. It's to bring light to the fact that you can eliminate human violence and human rights violations by tracking and by not buying products that come from bad sources. And here's a quote from Don Tapscott. I know you've read the book, and it is in Portuguese. According to the United Nations, conflict diamonds and rough diamonds are used to finance armed conflict and aimed at overthrowing legitimate governments. They're a scourge on society. And he says, I can think of no more relevant example of blockchain for good than rejecting diamonds mined in conflict zones that would otherwise keep despots in power. And he reinforces that the blockchain means that the diamond supply chain cannot be corrupted. All right, I'm going to move to land registration unless you have some questions.
Here we go.
Okay. Land registration. This is actually my favorite area because is someone speaking?
No.
It's absolutely global. This is a global problem. for countries like Brazil and the United States, a lot of this happened during colonial times. Some of it happened after slavery. Land is the most important asset around the world, and it's traded and sold and stolen, and it's uncertain for millions and millions of humans. Property rights have been managed on pieces of paper that are lost or destroyed. And in the example of Honduras, 60% of the land is undocumented, and that's just one data point that probably can be said of many, many countries. Smart contracts, which you've been studying, help increase the transparency and the speed and the legitimacy of property transactions. So even if you have what you think are clear rights to your property, you still have an opportunity with blockchain to transact real estate with much more authenticity and much more credibility and speed. Like many of our supply chains, the real estate transaction is a very slow process in most countries, even those that have very sophisticated bureaucracies. UK, which is, I think, sophisticated bureaucracy would suit them fine, has just completed a very successful blockchain pilot with Her Majesty's Land Registry. And this is a sacred area which they're opening up to blockchain so that they can learn how to manage land registry and ownership nationwide. Right now, they're only doing pilots in Scotland and England, but it is reported that these pilots have been successful, and this is very good news for the developed world. Undeveloped world has huge issues, which we'll talk a little bit more about. There's one case I wanted to mention. It's not yet a blockchain case, but blockchain would have saved this family. And I ran across it while I was preparing to talk to you, and I wanted to mention it because we often think, oh, maybe the United States has this all figured out. Well, we have a huge population of people who are uncertain about their property rights and whose land much of it was given to them after the Civil War in the southern United States. And the majority of that land is not well documented and is being taken from families on a constant basis. And so this is a case you could research if you're interested. The family of Mitchell Reels obtained their property after the war and had it for many generations, over 100 years. And it was on a riverbed and it had a beach. It was the only beach in that part of North Carolina where Black people were permitted to swim because it would belong to them. And gradually, the lawyers in the area manipulated the documents and their access to the property to the point where they evicted the Reels family from their land. And when they protested and presented their deeds and refused to leave, two of the sons were put in jail for contempt of court, and they stayed in jail for 7 years. So this is a very tragic story, but it really illustrates the need for clear land registration and property rights around the world. We know that in Haiti, recovery efforts were very difficult because the ownership of land still cannot be identified. So I think this is a very exciting opportunity. It's true in Cambodia, Vietnam, and I'm sure it's also true in Brazil. So something to pay attention to. There's good news that land registration has been adopted in parts of Russia. Sweden has a system that they're piloting, and you've probably heard about these already. But in many parts of the developing world, there are no existing land registration systems. And there's a clear argument for introducing them. And I mentioned Haiti, where they simply couldn't put people back, you couldn't put them back in their homes because they couldn't prove that they owned the home or the land. Terrible, terrible crisis. There is a blockchain project underway in India on the Ethereum blockchain. And again, this is a test. It's in one state, but as these tests succeed, the potential is that the country of India or the country of China will begin to adopt the system. Dubai is a fascinating example because they are using blockchain to record local real estate contracts. But Dubai has been ahead of the curve for a long time, and they use blockchain throughout the country. And I had a note here I wanted to mention. Oh, it's on the next, oh, okay. They introduced blockchain very early, and they've been experimenting in many areas. And they've actually gone so far as to want to gather and connect the data, and connecting and interoperability of databases, of course, is crucial to these successes. But what they want to do is be able to, when they're small enough, to collect all the data that they can collect that's relevant to real estate and put it into one immutable system. Now, of course, this also includes bills. So they're going to make sure that they have the information they need for taxation as well. But they want to be the first government in the world to apply all of these transactions through a single blockchain. And again, the date 2020, it may have been put in a earlier research because it's coming up fast, but they have a very ambitious plan. And here are a couple of comments from people who are involved in these real estate deals. The first one is kind of important because it says that this is one of the first successful pilots in a legal market, in areas of goodwill or areas of charity or areas of humanitarian aid. It's different than entering a legal market, which is exactly what's happening in the UK pilot. They have to work within the bureaucracy of the legal system. So England's successful blockchain project is part of a wider transformative initiative. And it's the first example of working in the legal system, eliminating waste and avoiding fraud and human error. And this was reported in Forbes. But I think it's very optimistic. Now, again, these are developed country notes. There's a lot of work to be done. There has been some land registration progress made in Russia, but the biggest need for it really is in India, at the Far East, and as we said, we have issues in our countries as well. Okay, I'm going to pause there, and let's talk about this, Carl. What do we think?
I can remember on the blockchain revolution the talk of Hernandez Soto, which saying that we can include something about $90 trillion of people in the economy just for land registry. And we have been working with the notary system here, trying to articulated their ecosystem for beginning a blockchain land registry project here in Brazil. Basically to speed up the process and give more transparency and accuracy to the process. But on a second hand, which I'm not fully disclosing yet, I believe that doing this with the engineering and architecture ecosystem, we can start mapping and putting on the system those properties who isn't yet registered or recognized as a full property for someone, which is they have been traded and transferred on a non-official basis.
And there are billions. Yeah, go ahead.
We are talking about millions of people in Sao Paulo and Rio, and thousands of people on every city here in Sao Paulo, in the state of Sao Paulo or in Brazil. We have cases of people living in occupied areas with no legal property of their of their homes. And we're not talking about cardboard shacks or something like that. We're talking full brick and mortar homes or 3 or 4 story buildings and something like that.
Any comments from the gang?
Just a second.
We must think as well as we've got a lot of people living in regions like Rocinha and slums and communities where collective property is actually a right, and it's not designed yet, not even fully designed, but by law itself. So blockchain may come as a true way of assuring legal property and those rights for people who are so much in need of starting from somewhere, from some point. And we must think as well as for those who are always moving as refugees and places that will suffer from global climate changes and environmental disasters that probably will demand them some quick action that it's not compatible with the land registry system we've got here now. So, and we can think as well as on an environmental perspective such as the Amazon forest, and as a way of keeping it the way it is. If we can trace it, we can preserve it.
Nice. Yeah, the Amazon forest is very important to all of us. Yeah.
That's it. That's a global perspective, actually. It's really hard for us to think on a country-wise perspective when we've got worldwide problems that need worldwide solutions. So,
Excellent. Very nice. Yeah, I want to just talk a minute about the refugees. It is, I mentioned healthcare as a blockchain application, and the concept there is that everybody would be registered on the blockchain and they would have an identity and their history would be maintained. We have millions, as you know, millions of people, refugees who don't even have a country, never mind a blockchain account or land. So thank you for mentioning that, because next time I give this talk, I'm going to talk about refugees. It's huge. It's very important.
yes, and sometimes when you've got authoritarian government systems, they just disappear with the registration and they just say, okay, this land is not yours anymore. And people can't actually prove that they once had that land at all. So,
and even, you're right, and that's why I use this example from North Carolina in the United States, because they had documents, but the bureaucrats had designed other documents and left them out of the system. And so they're obviously, none of these solutions is solved by blockchain alone. There are political and human and commercial interests, but blockchain is an enabler of a better solution.
We have here in Brazil, there's this company with an insurance company who is developing with the United Nations Refugee Committee insurance for rent, which they got like $100 rent insurance for someone to rent a room and start their lives here in Brazil, and which they can at least guarantee the rent payment through this insurance, which they can hire by an app. And all the costs for the prices of this insurance is paid by other clients of the company, which part of their prices are being diverted for social insurance, since they have no accidents, or they are not using their subscriptions on anything. So if they got good behavior, they will, some of their prizes will be used to finance the insurance for someone who cannot pay for that. So we can at least give this people who are coming from Syria and Haiti and Venezuela at least some start on a place with a bed or something for them to live as they are looking for some work or for a job. We are also working on identity project with the notaries, which we can add up all the documents that the people have for something that will be a national accepted ID protocol, which you can use your local ID, you can take a national ID here in Brazil, you can use your passport, and you can use your school history, your diplomas, and everything that, and you can have all these documents condensed on the same platform. As required, you can just send a link or open access for those registers.
Would this be centralized or decentralized? Would the control still be with the government?
Oh, you know me. This is completely decentralized. We're talking about 15,000 independent notaries that we are beginning to articulate this year to have this project running up on 2020. And we realize 2020 is right next door. We already have the platform and we have all the pieces together. We only have to bring the notaries back.
That's exciting. Great.
Yeah, I'm talking with Don this afternoon about that.
Oh, good. Well, he hasn't seen my presentation yet, so tell him I said hello. Okay. Anybody else have a comment? We talked about food security. Is that something that you think about for your families, or is that not a concern?
Well, we have some people here who works with coffee, and they're talking about tracking and getting certificates on coffee. And because they came from soy, also they came from some in-country cities which have a strong agricultural studies universities. And some of you want to talk about your projects? Everybody's kind of shy here, you know. Yeah. they just don't want to show how much English they speak, you know.
That's right. Well, maybe we should just do some samba.
Yeah, they're good on beer and dancing. They are all good here.
Okay. Well, I think, no, I like the questions so far, and I don't want to keep you too long, but I have one more slide, Carl, just to end you with some thought starters.
We have someone who... Oh, this is the point? Okay. Yeah, someone wants to see this slide, then you can go.
Oh, okay. So this is the last slide, and this is really to just summarize some of the things that we've spoken about, not about the individual solutions, but the general opportunity for blockchain to contribute to social good. In order for this to happen, we have to continue to increase awareness. We still have, we might call them blockchain deniers, who remember the collapse of the value of cryptocurrency and consider this a threat. It has nothing to do with blockchain as an infrastructure, and we have to educate people about that. We're not talking necessarily about dealing in cryptocurrency. We're talking about blockchain as an enabler of data and decentralizing data. The energy consumption issue comes up all the time. It's in the book. If you read the book, when the book was written, the Blockchain Revolution was written, the comment was made that the amount of energy required to produce cryptocurrency equaled all the energy of the 5 largest supercomputers in the world. Now that was 2015. Today, cryptocurrency and blockchain consume the same amount of energy as the country of Scotland. So this is a dramatic issue. The use of energy continues to increase, but a very good comment was made, and that was that the cost of having no central authority is the cost of this energy. So nothing's free. It does require energy in order for us to support decentralization. So that's important to remember. Another issue is talent. You may be executives, you may be managers, you may be strategists. Somebody has to do the coding. Somebody has to do the encryption. And the skills we need for people to be trained as either miners or cryptographers or other skills to implement blockchain are part of the technical challenge of these solutions. We spoke about scalability and speed. This is a general challenge for blockchain. It is in pilot in hundreds and hundreds of places. We haven't really tested it completely for really high volume transactions. And I think we can get the speed in the pilots, but we don't know what the speed will look like when the volumes scale. And then the last point that I'd like to make is we talk about supply chain a lot. And there's a new book that gathers up our research on supply chain. Carl, do you have a copy of that book, the supply chain book from BRI?
Yes, I stole 2 of them at the office in the Toronto meeting, you know, and I managed to steal one with Don's signature and autograph on it.
Well, the good news is that the articles in the book are from our research library, and so you have access to those research projects. One of them being, I think, the diamond story. But supply chain is at the heart of certainly, well, actually, the legal registration of land is a huge array of people, and lawyers and judges and courts, and in supply chain management of transportation. You may have heard about the Maersk solution, where they're managing 1/3 of the world's cargo is now in the trade lens blockchain, which means that we now have, I didn't list transportation today because it's not necessarily a social good, but this is one of the ecosystems that has come together and has developed standards. And that's what's required in order to put a blockchain together. So collaboration and the ability to build partnerships is a very, very important point. And then finally, I lied, there's one more slide. Carl and I have a friend, Dale Christie, who is the former VP of strategy for FedEx. He's now a fellow. He came up with this term, which many people, including Don, have claimed credit for. But Dale is the one who named this fact about blockchain. The blockchain is a team sport. And it's a very simple point, very memorable. You cannot do blockchain alone. You may have a private blockchain which has a limited group of participants, but in general, you need everyone's participation. And Dale is one of the founders of the Blockchain and Transportation Association, which now has hundreds of transportation companies in its membership in order to develop standards for the industry. So that's part of the process that we have to go through. And that's my message to all of you. Delighted to meet you. Carl, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for being available for us and bringing a broader view of what we've been talking about all this week. And we especially been around talking about education and sending a different message, not just the technical one, but the one which is we need an ecosystem and we need to play it all together and form this new mentality, as they put very well on saying that it's a team sport.
Good. Okay, obrigado. Have a nice day.
We got someone who wants.
Yes, one question. Usually the problem with the new technology is not the technology itself, but its adoption. Because this requires a change of mindset, new lexical, because it's a world that people can't see, and so they, as they don't understand what is going on, they don't want this. I'm a futurist, but I come from a cultural background, social cultural. So I noticed that this is fundamental. So I would like to know, how are you dealing with this? The narrative, let's say so. How can it be, because it's not sexy and it's not understandable and it's not, it sounds scaring and so on. And what kind of process do you have in order to change mindsets so that the technology can be adopted? Communication, narrative, and so on. Change the cultural aspect.
Okay. Well, no problem. I have it all figured out. No, no, I'm just kidding. My background, Carl knows, my background is actually in adult learning. And you raise a really important point. I think one of our strategies is to introduce blockchain and the positive benefits of technology to younger people earlier, so that we're not confronting these adults who've already made up their minds and have their own experiences. But when you want to educate adults, you have to understand something called transformative learning. And adults generally don't change their mind unless they see something of personal value or challenge or risk, which requires them to think differently. And I love what you brought up, and of course I don't have a solution, but I would say that we have to understand how much repetition and how we have to make the solutions relevant to the people we're talking to. And that's why I want to start thinking about blockchain for social good. We spent millions of dollars, Carl and I, doing research on essentially commercial applications. And we had a few examples of social good. But I think now, if we want to persuade people to do things like register on a blockchain or share their land documentation, they have to see the social value or something valuable to them. The sad part about the land registration is that for every human who doesn't have clear title to land, there's somebody else who thinks they do. And so you've got to confront this resistance. And that's why legislation, what Carl is doing, these alliances are so important, because we have to move large numbers of people in the right direction. But you have made a very important point. A slide presentation is not going to move the needle. It's going to take movements, and it's going to take focus. And I think you need to, one thing that I like to remind people is, you can't boil the ocean, so pick a project that you personally think you can. Maybe land registration is a good one. Maybe the whole class could brainstorm, what can we do about land registration in Brazil, and focus. And that way we have a better chance of change.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joan. People have a lot of talk to sort about here.
Yeah, go ahead. Talk among yourselves. I'm going to go get some breakfast, and I'll see you later, Carl.
Okay, see you. Bye.